Hello, everyone. Welcome to the workshop 5, which is based on politics. Today, we are going to discuss a lot of things, a lot of stakeholders in politics, but what is politics in general? So, in politics, what you may consider is not just like the politics with respect to India, but like in general, with respect to Western liberal democracies, Asia, or like general geopolitics that exists. But also, we are going to extend it to, let's say, international organization and how politics seep into all these international organizations as well. But what we generally understand with politics is that there are different forms of governments, and people who are able to make policies are people who are in power. So basically, like how people get into power, who we should essentially vote, whether there's only voting system, how we can essentially have different leadership forms and so on and so forth. But we also understand and recognize that there are different forms of governments like democracy, communism, dictatorship, autocratic, so all of that. But like the specificity or like the beauty of debating is that we mostly like look into democracy because it just like brings in a large spectrum of arguments, but also it also like shows that there's going to be a possibility of a large chunk of things to happen, which like that is necessarily a lot difficult in, let's say, the countries with dictatorship, but also like a large chunk of things can actually impact this country, but like also like how democracy is just general will of people. I think there is also one thing that I wanted to discuss. It's about populism. So essentially people think that populism is bad, but if you see and look it through the idea of what the dictionary actually says, populism isn't necessarily bad. It's just like the rights and beliefs of people and the common people in general. So it's not always bad that majoritarianism or populism is bad, but it's just like what the majority of individuals hold as their opinion, and then why and how we can reform that opinion if it is per se bad. So it deals with the people who are in position of power, people who are capable of making decisions, the legislative part of it, but then how like people essentially pass the bills and all of that. But like essentially know that like only like there is only one country which performs direct democracy, that is Switzerland. Apart from that, all of the democracies are indirect, meaning like you elect your representative, and then those representatives make the laws. But when it comes to Switzerland, you have you not only just elect your representative, but you also get to vote for the different laws. So there's a full referendum based voting. So like every time when a law is supposed to be passed, every individual is supposed to vote, and that's like the beauty of it. But also like this is something which you cannot necessarily apply for all of the nations, and Switzerland is necessarily considered as an exception to it. Can anyone tell me as to like why other nations cannot? Let's say, do you think India can have direct democracy?
India can't have a direct democracy because the number of people who are in India, the population is way too great to actually collect and have everyone vote for any law.
Yeah,
Exactly.
additionally, the different, like the diverse different religions, causing the diversity in India makes it hard to actually pass laws because at the end of the day, you're going to be having one like community which is
Right.
against the laws.
So till now we have two. One is that large population. Second is diversity. Do you think there is some like another thing that also impacts this ability? Do you think India is like capable of maintaining that much amount of data, or is India capable of giving access to that much amount of people in terms of like voting ability? Like, do you think we have that much amount of technology present? So I think in terms of technology as well, India isn't necessarily capable of doing so. All right. So like the motion that actually exists with respect to politics is policy motion, like not policy motions per se, but then like policies which should be implemented or not, but then elections, population, affirmative actions, and then how necessarily you can like cater to political parties, what should be the strategy of political parties, what should the politicians do, and all of that. So a lot of motions are going to be considered with respect to that, but also like minorities and so on and so forth. But let's start with like what politicians are and why politicians matter. So politicians, I mean, I think like on the very face value, we think that politicians are bad. But when it comes to the debates and when you're supposed to use politicians as an argument, or let's say just characterization, they're not always assumed good or bad actors, and you shouldn't assume them to be good or bad actors. And I remember telling you this from like the previous sessions, that like you cannot just simply assume that an actor is bad or good, just you have to characterize as to like why and what are the interest of those actors in the first place, and why an actor is likely to act in a certain way. So before we move forward, I want you all to give me a good characterization of what a politician is and what do they look like. You can like just give me one sentence and then like we can go back and forth with others. What do you all think politicians are like? And just like if you had to characterize who politicians are, what would you do?
Any person who takes part in decision making and making laws.
Okay. So we would say that he has some kind of authority. All right. Anything else?
The person should have a way with his words to like convince others, persuasive.
Is very influencer. Has his way with the words. Okay, very good. Next. If you had to characterize Indian politicians, what would they look like?
They are confident, like they'll support, like they're confident to like go with it.
Do you say confident in terms of public speaking, or like they just have a charisma?
I will say both.
Okay. Do you think politicians are per se literate in India, or do you think they aren't?
I think they are literate.
Okay. Do we have difference of opinions here with anyone who think that Indian politicians aren't literate?
If we talk about people, let's say in Panchayati Raj and everything, maybe they're not always literate. So we can't say that all politicians will be literate in India.
Okay, so not all are literate. But do you think it matters whether or not? Okay, with Vedant, you want to see? Go on.
Yeah. So about the question, yeah, they have to have a basic sense of literacy to actually be politically active. Additionally, I think especially Indian politicians, they use religion a lot.
Mhm.
So they are able to use that religion to get voters.
All right. Do you think they use more things other than religion to get votes?
Like they manage to get the people on their impacts. They talk about how they're planning on implementing like new changes. Like they impact their entire political run by saying, oh, we will do this after we get elected.
Okay. So do you all think that all politicians need to be educated?
I don't think so. They really need to be educated. Like they should have the sense of like confidence and what they are like think is right.
Okay,
They should have like experience.
fair enough. What do you think politicians care about the most?
Power,
Okay,
the power they have on people.
yes,
What they can do to maintain that power.
very good. Anything else? So generally, we are on consensus that people who are politicians essentially want to be in power. So what I've done here is that, so politicians, I think we have already dealt with that, but like politicians oftentimes and not have big capital in terms of social capital of how people and society perceives them, in terms of political capital, meaning their connections with, let's say, political leaders, political parties, etc., but also economical capital. Oftentimes and not, these politicians come from a very privileged background who have some amount of like money with them, meaning they have, like, they're oftentimes and not rich. And that's like the thing that in terms of like politicians, who politicians are. But like they're also very popular, like people know them, and therefore people essentially think that they are different from other individuals. So when I make like a particular say statement in, let's say, anywhere, it's different as opposed to when a politician makes a statement. Why do you think that is the case? So why do you think the words of politicians are different from the words of a normal individual?
Because the politician is known for like he has the like experience that he knows what he's doing. Like we don't know what politics is. He knows that what is the law and what he can do, like that stuff.
So you think politicians know it all?
Not exactly, but people believe them to know it all.
Exactly. So people have faith in them. Okay. Anything else? Do you think it's okay for a politician to not think about what they're saying twice when they're making, specifically in public figures, like let's say they're like tweeting something, or like in a rally? Like, why do you think politicians have to take that extra care as opposed to a normal individual? Like, just make the differentiation for them. So because people have faith in them, don't you think if they speak something which goes against the faith of people, it's more likely to hurt people?
Yeah, it will turn the people against the politician, and they might lose their power to some other person who is a like enemy of them, opposition.
Exactly. Anything else? So this is with respect to the motions that come, that like politicians should have higher responsibility as opposed to a normal individual, and that's why I'm discussing that. But if you guys have anything to add, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll just go back. Why politicians are different from others. So the idea behind why politicians are different from others is twofold. One, on the idea of their capital that exists, meaning people who are able to listen to them, people who have access to them. Meaning, if I post a certain statement on Instagram today, I think my max to max 1,000 followers are going to see it. But then if a politician like puts out a statement, specifically if it is controversial, it's going to have more reach, more number of people are going to be seeing it, more number of people are going to be impacted by it. And as what Arna said, people have belief in it. Like, people have believe in you, meaning like if you're going to make a certain statement which is essentially wrong, people are going to believe that, look, it's coming from a person who is a credible source, and therefore we are more like going to be like buying into that. Like, look into the different kinds of example of when like during the time of COVID, a lot of like politicians in India started saying that, oh, if you eat this wafer, you're going to be able to not get COVID. And people started believing that. He was literally advertising this entire thing on his like social media. And that's why like the kinds of things that like politicians say have a higher value, because oftentimes not people believe in them, but also there's a large number of reach. But also when people believe in such a powerful figure, they're more likely not to go back and check as to what they're saying, meaning they never go ahead and like have the check mechanism in terms of the factual statement of what the politicians say. But what do you think they want? It's essentially, I think we agree, they want votes in large, but also there's something called as nepotism in politicians, like how ancestrally they are into the idea of politics. So it passes on to generation. In India, we have a couple of like examples like Gandhi family, Thackeray family, etc. But before we move forward into anything in terms of that, I want you all to give me some amount of like benefits and harms of family politicians. Do you think there can be anything good with respect to family politicians? Do we have any supporters here? Like, it's okay that family politicians exist? It's okay that's like it's a generational thing. I think it happens like on the lower value, like lower levels as well. I think Nitish Kumar and Bihar and all that. But like, give me example here.
Yeah, I feel that when you have family politics, you have more follow-throughs on plans by the government. So, for example, say like a certain prime minister or president is saying that, oh, we'll implement this policy, but then directly after that, like it's a good policy, but then directly after that, another president or prime minister comes in and says, oh, we're going to be revoking this policy. So I feel family politics like helps keep it steady. So it is passed through the family, and the people can explain to the direct family. There's a lot more chemistry, and so it's easier to roll out plans.
I think fair enough. There's more cohesion in the policies as well. Perpetuity of policies. But do you understand like how it can like literally go against you if it is basically if it is basically like a bad policy? So like we're just like arguing the like best case that the policy was good and was changed later. But what if the policy was bad and then it continues like cyclically in that particular region? But like regardless, okay, tell me why family politicians are good. I think we have 3 points, which are very valid points. Tell me more. Why do you think family politicians are still able to exist, considering that, let's say, let's assume that they don't have the merit, but they're still able to exist? Why?
Because there's like a good politician in the family, and the politician has lots of contacts. So people believe in that politician. So they are believing that these family members will have the same qualities and traits to lead the country like the like certain politician does.
Okay. Anything else? Do you all think that this experience that family politicians have is larger as opposed to those who are new to politics?
Well, yes, it would be like considered because of the grandfather might be a politician, so he must talk about it, and to this grandchildren, so the grandchildren might also take a politician. So yeah, it makes
Exactly. So you can pass on the strategies of politics. All right. Anything else? So let's assume this is like the exhaustion of the list, but I'm guessing this is the more intuitive way. But like, tell me what are the against part of it? Like why family politicians are bad?
The politician might like appoint his family, but that family person might not have like certain traits that like needed for running a country. So the country may go doomed. So like, yeah.
So it's against meritocracy.
Yeah.
An obvious point is that it's against democracy. It's against where people are supposed to decide who leads them. The majority may not agree with this decision.
So it leads to favoritism as opposed to democracy. Very good. Do we have anything else? I think it's like largely very intuitive. Think of it. Like, why are family politicians bad? Why do you think, even though people hate Gandhi family, like they're still existing? And why do you think people like in general hate the Gandhi family, and then like they keep like calling them out for like being very incapable? And
It reduces opportunity for newer politicians.
exactly. Anything else?
I feel like there is a lot of power abuse in like a family politician like sphere, because when you have like a family politician gang, there isn't really any family member that is going to talk openly about corruption in his or her party. So there is a lot of power abuse in that sense.
Yes. Do we think there's anything more which is bad or good about family politicians for those who join right now or in general?
They could be like physically unfit, or they could be, say, sick due to a family illness or something. That could lead to problems and instability.
Okay, so if it is a genetic problem, it will be passed on. Okay.
I'm brainstorming here.
Okay. Okay. okay, I just consider it. But like think deeply into the idea that like why are family politicians good? I think even if you see family politicians are more likely to be trusted more as opposed to a new politician based on the precedents. So because I think it's the same point, but it's based on precedents, which doesn't let others think as to like why a particular new like politician is good. But also they have a lot of power abuse, meaning like because I think it became extremely difficult. And I don't know if you all know this, but it became difficult, very difficult for Aam Aadmi Party to even like get started in Delhi because of the fact that like there was so many like I think there was Congress, but like also the idea that like it was very difficult to start like like how the power abuse, like they never want a new party to exist. So family politicians essentially have more power, essentially have more contacts, essentially have more ability to dominate over the others, and therefore people essentially think they're bad. But like, did you understand? Like, even if like something is intuitively good or something is intuitively bad, you can still think through as to why a thing could have more value over the others. So yes, that is one of the things that I wanted to discuss. But like moving on, did you know that like politicians don't have a retirement age, meaning like any person can be a politician for a really long time? I think we have a couple of people who are politicians still. Manmohan Singh is 90 years old. I did not know that. I was really shocked. But like we have a couple of people who are good politicians, but they're all very old. But let's also think of like why or whether or not we should have retirement age for politicians. So for people who say that we should have retirement age for politicians, give me reasons why.
Can you repeat that?
Why should we have retirement age for politicians? Let's say if you are 60 years of age, you can no longer be a member of parliament, or you can no longer like stand for elections.
And
So
one thing we
you
could
can
say
break
is
that.
that Anna can go first. Anna Rajput.
Okay. So like you can say, I forgot my point. Give you a minute.
Okay, Dhingra can go now.
Okay, so my point was that so maybe sometimes people can have a little old, like an old mindset or an orthodox mindset while running for the elections, and that can help them.
That's a very good point.
Like we should give, like other people should get the chance to go ahead with the politics, not only like keep it like the older people can keep hogging it.
Exactly. So younger generation, or like in general, other people. Okay. Anything else? Think.
Politicians might also be physically unfit or even like mentally unfit after they reach a certain age to govern.
There's one easy rebuttal for this, that no one would work against an old and no one would vote for someone with an old and orthodox mindset or physical and mental inefficiency. Like that is
Okay.
one simple rebuttal that could knock these points out. So
Ma'am,
Yes.
can I rebut that?
Yes.
Yes. So, like we'd already discussed, like all of these people, they have more faith on politicians that have been working for a very long time or have been in
Exactly.
office for a very long time. So
Yes.
they in fact vote for them.
Yeah. So we can go back and forth with that. Yes. Other points.
Yeah, in favor we can say that the older politicians go biased in turn to someone after
Like
a long time. They would like
come
favor
under
someone.
orthodox mindset. Doesn't that come under old and orthodox mindset? I'm sorry, doesn't it?
I mean, are you talking about like the internal politics and then in the political party and then they get biased towards one person? I think that could
Yeah.
still exist. Yeah. Anything else? So you all want that? Okay, let's just not have retirement age for politicians. It's all good.
If we go for against that, the older politicians have more experience and they might not exactly have an old or orthodox mindset. So yeah, they have more experience. Not necessarily they have that kind of mindset or like any physical or mental illness.
Yeah, so the in favor, oh my God, this is so hypocritical saying it again. In favor, they're saying that everyone, it's generalizing that people have old and orthodox mindset, which is not the case. It's a stereotypical statement.
Okay. But tell me one thing, like don't you all think the moment when you give that ability of to a politician that look, you can like stand for election how much so ever longer you want, don't you think it gives a lot of like hold of this person in that particular state or in that particular place, meaning a lot more power dynamics, a lot more power abuse, a lot more, let's say, just like general uniformity is also very bad, like change of government is also very necessary. So basically gives unchecked power abuse. Okay. Tell me, favor. I mean, against why, like, apart from experience, what do y'all think is good in older politicians? Why are they good? Like going to the like general experience and specifics of experience, like they obviously have seen more, meaning they know the mechanisms to handle a lot of things. But also, do y'all think, tell me one difference between a normal profession as opposed to politics. Like, why is it different from other professions?
We need to have like patience because many things can go wrong at the same time. We need to have like a clear mindset about what we are going to do and what consequences it can have.
Anything else? Why do you think politician needs experience? So why don't we say the same thing to others? Like, you know, okay, that's a very good thing that came to my mind. Like, there's something very different with respect to other profession. Specifically, let's say military. Like you have a retirement age. Government jobs, you have a retirement age. The reason why that is true is because a lot of these jobs need not just like need intellectual ability, but also need like physical capability of doing something, which is not necessarily true for politicians. Simply because the moment when you have that much amount of experience, you know how like politicians can be a figure of advice. So this figure of advice is something which solves a lot of problems. Like how even if irrespective of however we're like in a bad situation, we often tend to go back to like old people to know as to how we have to like deal with a particular situation. Meaning there's a lot more of like advisory capacity that like these individuals get. But like that's why like you don't necessarily need physical capability for um for a politician to stand in election of itself. Okay, so I'm thinking that assuming that it's just exhausted, we'll move further. So obviously there is no retirement age. Why? Experience in the field is extremely important, and therefore it is okay for no retirement age. But like that's not an opinion. You can have retirement age, and then you can go on and talk about why so. But like moving on, identity of politician is extremely important. A lot of like Indian politics and like in general, it's like a thing that is there in international politics as well. Kamala Harris in USA. So like you see that a lot of like politicians essentially associate with a particular caste, class, region, etc. Which not is it's not just like just for like obviously somebody if somebody exists they would have an identity, but they often tend to capitalize on that identity, but also like not just like in the bad sense, but like their policies are going to reflect to the kinds of like the place that they belong to. You know that in India we had B.R. Ambedkar, who was the face of the Dalit community, but also made sure that things like Article 15, just like right against discrimination and exploitation, all of this existed because of him, right? So a lot of identity of politicians essentially impact the way how people are going to like frame policies, or people are going to be empathetic towards certain kind of community or not, right? So therefore, identity of politicians is also something which you need to think about in general. But let's move on towards the next part, which is voter bank politics. So voter bank politics essentially means like a couple of things, like people like vote on different things. But before me telling you what are those different things, I want you all to tell me what is the consideration that people take while voting. So what do you all think people, okay, there are three parties in front of me. What should be my metric to judge as to which party I need to vote for? Arna, go on.
Which party has the more power, like to develop our country, to help us, like what they can provide us? Like check that first.
Okay. What else? Vedant, Arav, Arna, Nishka.
Brainstorming on points.
Okay. Think.
The mindset of the politician.
Like whether or not mindset, do you mean ideology?
Yes, ma'am. Whether they're new or open to new experiences or open to change, for example, not
So whether he is conservative or liberal.
yes, exactly.
What else?
The person they can relate to the most. So like the
Very
person
good.
whose identity is very relatable.
Okay, yes, perfect. What else? Do you think people only relate to identity? Like I am a Muslim, so I'm more likely to vote a Muslim, and I'm probably relatable to that. Like I'm just feeling relatable to that person. Or do you think people feel relatability on different aspects as well?
I think it would be on different aspects, but what those aspects, I don't know.
Okay.
Perhaps what funds are they like organizing? Like what is they are going to do and like that stuff. What they're providing, like what they're promising to do.
So their promises, or let's just take it as manifesto. What else? Do you like generally follow news or Indian politics? Or like, are you not interested in it whatsoever?
I find it boring.
Okay, so any more considerations? I want each one of you to give me at least one consideration. So we have one from Nishka, one from Anna, one from Anna. Vedant, are you still brainstorming?
Yeah, I'm working on the points.
Okay. Arav?
I'm still thinking.
Okay.
I feel they should see how it is exactly affecting the country.
So large scale changes and
Large scale changes, yes. And then they should look into the future and try and see what these changes mean for them in the long run.
so what is the future needs?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think they should also check out how trustable the party is in general and
Very
whether the party has lived up to its promises in the past.
They're engaging, like how much they're engaging in the politics. Like they
Very
have interest.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of times, like when the election is just like near, they'll just like come out of nowhere and you would be like, oh, they exist. So that's a really good point. Okay. So I'm going to assume that we're exhausted with what we have. So, okay. Yes. So, oh my God. Where is that? Oh my God, wait. Okay. It's so difficult. Yeah, so I'll tell you what exactly is the consideration of people in general in 5 like broad heads. One is identity politics. People often and not relate to the same identity. Muslim was a Muslim population, the same example. Second is emotions and capitalization on emotions. So essentially, a lot of people are able to, let's say, just like thrive on the power based on the divide and rule situation. So a lot of people in South simply get both because of the fact that there's Kaveri issue existing. There's like a division between the rivers, how like in like there is a river politics, water politics, so on and so forth. And people oftentimes do not make their election campaigns about that, which essentially changes and impacts like the emotions of people and changes the governments in South for that matter, right? So, because the accessibility to water impacts people, and that's the part of their emotion. People essentially, like the politicians, essentially capitalize on those emotions and therefore win elections based on that. Third is policies. Obviously, the welfare, health, education, how good are they going to consider all of these things is also one of the things. Fourth is manifesto and campaigns. So manifesto is like the promise they made, but also like advertisement. Advertisements play a really important role in how like people are elected, like the rallies that they do, the social media campaigns that they do. Did you all know like the amount of like money that like BJP spent in Bihar for just like solely for the purpose of advertisements? A lot of like all of these things also come into like consideration, gives them that amount of traction to give like a way towards them as to like whether or not they're going to get elected or not. Fifth is past experience. I think you all already pointed out that whether or not they have previously mishandled like issues or not. So, for example, if a particular government did miserably during the time of COVID, people are going to essentially take it into consideration while voting, because presidents essentially decide whether or not people will vote for you again. Yes, Arna?
I wanted to know, like Aam Aadmi Party in Gujarat, like won, did not win because he was like, who was the leader? I forgot his name, but still he was like providing a lot of free things, but still the Gujarat people did not choose him. But they chose BJP for that. So like, what could like in which category would that go in?
Yeah, so like if they're providing like goods to people, I'm guessing it's just like corruption and bribery, which shouldn't exist. But like, I mean, like a lot of people, and that's a very good point, right? Because essentially, even though people like would give a lot of goodies and everything to people to vote them, people aren't mad always, or people aren't blind while voting. So they would essentially understand that they're bribing them, and therefore, okay, at the time of that, they just consume the goods, but they would go on and like not vote them later. So that these things also exist. So you can just say that people are rational as opposed to people caring about the goods. So that's the rebuttal to that. All right. So then we have political campaigns and how they work. So political campaigns are not just like, okay, it's for everybody and I'm going to like influence people to vote for me, but they're always like directed towards specific people. The reason why is that essentially political parties know who they are trying to cater to and who they want them to vote as. Like obviously, like if you don't think that these people are your voter base, you would not want to change their opinion. Like it's just like a lot of like efforts, and people don't want to do that. It's just that like changing the entire opinion of a particular person is difficult, and therefore what you want is these are the people who voted for me before, and I want them to vote for me again. And that's like the repeat politics that exists. So people essentially want the majority of people to vote for them, but also like the idea that like, okay, these are the people who are my voter base. So all political parties have their voter base, the people who they cater to, the people who they essentially look forward to. So they basically use this to influence decision of specific people. Political parties try to mobilize supports of the party. So they use popular figures in areas to gain votes. For example, if you see all of the political like banners that they use during elections, all of those banners, if it is like BJP, it would have Modi's face on it, because they essentially think that Modi is the face of BJP, and essentially a lot of people like him. So if people have traction for him, if people love him, if he's the figure of the party, people are more likely to even vote for him, even the smallest district of India. Again, like political campaigns are to like gain attention and garner the attention. Like a lot of times, I don't know if you have like heard this song, but it's really funny. It's the Nitish Kumar's theme song, like during the Bihar election that they made up. So obviously, what do you think? Like who is capable of doing all this? Who is capable of making these big banners? Who is capable of making theme songs for elections? Who do you think is capable of doing all that?
Bigger political parties who have been in power for a long time, maybe.
Exactly. So this kind of gives an upper hand, and that's why I said like advertisement play a very important role. So it gives an upper hand to these bigger political parties who have capital to go on and have the ability to influence people. But political campaigns also include other things like rhetorical speeches, media interviews. So, example, I don't know if you have saw this video. So it was about like Kejriwal in the recent India Today interview. So he was questioned about like the previous promises that he made and why he wasn't able to fulfill all of them. And then press conferences. So it can be one-to-one conversation between news reporters where they can ask you as to like what is your opinion and what are the things that you're going to change, why did you not do it previously, so on and so forth. Then you have negative campaigns, which is a very prominent thing in India. So can anyone just give a guess, like a wild guess as to what negative campaign could look like? A little bit of it isn't just on the slide, but then go on.
Like the person might promise something and the opposition might say that they had promised this in the like last time also that they had been elected, but it has been not still be like completed. So that might lead to that campaign being negative.
Okay.
I feel negative campaign is like when you get forced for
I think you're not audible properly, Vidhan.
Okay, can you hear me now? Well, I feel negative campaigns essentially are when like these political parties get exposed for doing something wrong and then the campaign goes horribly like downhill.
Okay. So negative campaign. Okay, Nishka, go on.
I think a negative campaign can also mean that although campaigning is only for like garnering support for a political party, this political party might just go ahead and you know talk negatively about another political party just so that
Exactly. So that's exactly what negative political campaigns are. But then, okay, so essentially what happens is that you want people to vote for you, but you also want people to not vote for other political parties. And therefore, you would go on and like spread things, or like it can be true, but it can be wrong as well. Of if it is a second case, they can just like attract defamation cases. But if it is the first case, it's more likely that people are going to fall for it and people are just going to be like, oh, I'm not going to vote for the political party. So it can be like, oh, last time they had in their like speeches, they can involve stuff like they did not in the last, like in the previous elections, they said this, but they did not do it. But also highlighting things like, oh, this particular political party is so corrupt, like is so corrupted and stuff like that. Just like highlighting bad stuff about the political party of like other political parties is called negative campaign. So example of it is like how Mayawati in the elections blamed BJP for misleading the population. So essentially BJP used this negative campaign as a tactic against the other political parties in order to garner support. And that's why, like, it's not like that's why, but like also Mayawati like lost. So and she blamed BJP for it. So I'm just like giving you example. So again, political campaigns can have major issues being raised and addressed. And that's what political campaigns have. But let's talk about a certain thing that I wanted to talk to you all about. So identity politics and voting people based on identity. So it can just simply be like me telling, or like a Dalit community, a member of the Dalit community going on and like trying to get votes from the Dalit community, but also like generally like region-based politics, like religion-based politics, all of it. So it can all come into that idea. Do you think there is something which is good about this, something which is bad about it? Go on. Think. Why do you think identity? So we don't have to start with favor. We can start with whatever comes to your mind right now. And you can think from both sides, politicians being the stakeholder and the people being the stakeholder.
Identity politics is like religion and religion-related politics, right?
Yeah, so it can include promises like, oh, if you vote for me, I'm going to also build temples for you. And if you're a Hindu, you're more likely to vote for them.
So I think that could like go against secularism, which is in the country's constitution, in our country's constitution, and it would lead them to support one religion over the other.
Okay, secularism, biased towards some communities. All right. Anything else? Like, why do you think people are able to people are able to just gain votes based on identity? So if I say one day that I belong to minority community, is more likely to attract minority people to vote for me. Why do you think it works?
Because I have a favor like why it works, because people want to see themselves as the representative. They want to see like a person like themselves to be like leading them. They want to see like themselves in them.
Yeah, so you have relatability for these individuals, and therefore you're likely to trust these individuals because you think that this person comes from my community, and community oftentimes do not have a lot of cohesion between them, but also you have like you see that person as the role model. So you think that, oh, if this person is able to lead the country, I think other members of the community are also going to be able to do so. Okay, next. Think. Do you think do you think more why do you think majoritarian politician is likely to make changes for minority people?
So that they'll not like attract minority, like people from minority, they'll like support them instead of going for leaders of their caste or creed or whatever.
Exactly. So they see that this particular person is more likely to make changes. So arts against majoritarian rule. They see that hope in them, and therefore they vote for them. So probably changes in terms of affirmative actions, policies, etc. Anything else? Do you think it has something to do with representation? Thank you all. I didn't know that politics is such a like non-interesting thing for you all, but then okay, go on. Arna, Dhingra, Arav Jain, Nishka Chaudhary. I literally have to like sound like an online teacher who is struggling to get interactive students. But then tell me.
It could lead to conflict between religions.
Okay.
Also, if there's like a person leading in their like own clan, the person has more power over certain people. Like it will affect them that that person is saying about us. So like we should hear him or her.
I feel identity politics is directly proportional to hate speech because politicians really want to feed into like people's aggressive and violent opinions against other communities, and because of that they're more likely to be speaking harmfully to other communities that are not supported by the majority community.
So oftentimes and not, their emotions are also capitalized.
Yeah, their emotions are exploited.
Exactly. Anything else? Do you think like just because a person is from my community, they're more likely to like do like change? So who do you think, if a community is like significantly oppressed, but this person is somehow able to reach a level where he's able to stand for elections, what do you think is significantly different with this person as opposed to the community in of itself? The answer is that a lot of people are oppressed and they have a lot of structural barriers. if a person is able to overcome those barriers, essentially means that they're the persons who come from a privileged background within that community. Not all members of the community can essentially be poor, or not all members of the community can essentially not have political access. So they are essentially going to be from the creamy layer of the society, creamy layer of their community, meaning they have less relatability towards that identity. And the only reason why they're using the identity is to gain the voter base. So there's just to exploit the voter base, not necessity that they are going to relate. All right. So moving on, there's something called as strategic voting that I wanted to talk to you all about. So strategic voting is basically when you don't vote for the thing that you think, okay, for example, there's a like party A and there's party B. I essentially love party B, but I'm going to vote for party A because I think that if I'm going to vote party B, they're less likely to get into power because there's not a lot of people who are going to vote for party B. And therefore, because I think that party A somehow is on the common ground, I would vote for party A because I think majority of people are going to vote for them. That's called strategic voting. So why do you think? So if you have strategic voting over choice voting is basically when you vote for choice voting is when you vote for people who you actually want to get elected. But strategic voting is when you vote for people when like strategically just so that you can get people into power. So if you had to choose one, what would you do and why so?
Well, if I was me, I would choose strategic voting because your choice voting might not literally have the best effect. Like you like it, but it might not be like powerful enough to like fulfill what you want. The strategic voting might give you what you want and might even develop like better spaces for you to live.
Okay.
A point for choice voting can be that's what a better representation is. That's what you're supposed to vote for, so that you're actually showing the correct representation and like the true representation of what the people of the country want.
Very good. What else? I mean, do you really think your policy is going to be passed if it is strategic voting? Like, do you think they're essentially not exactly lining to what you want? It's just that you're voting for them because you think they're likely to get elected. So do you think policies are actually going to be there? Or is policy the only thing that you need to care about? Where do you think you're going to have more um, improvement in political parties?
Well, it could go for strategic because like they would be offering something better. That's why you are like choosing them. Like why will more people choose it? Because they are offering something better. And you can exactly know what will they do in
But it
future.
isn't
How will trust.
exactly what is helping you as an individual. If you go for strategic voting, it's not directly helping you. In choice voting, it's directly helping you.
With respect to the improvement argument, but though I think like if you want to say that like because you would, I mean, I don't think political parties have any kind of incentive to improve simply because you think that you like essentially buy into what ideology party A essentially has. However, when it comes to party B, and you vote for them, they're more likely to change because then they would be like, oh, we do have a competition, irrespective of how big or small of a competition it is, it still makes a difference simply because people think that like it is a thing to care about. Otherwise, if you don't vote for the choice voting, people are never going to consider that particular ideology as something which is significant and people care about it, and therefore they're more likely to change in choice voting. Did you understand that, Arnav?
Yeah, I got it.
Hmm. Hmm. Anything else?
Not that I can think of.
I have,
Okay.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I have an argument in favor of strategic voting. So we can say that, for example, if we have two parties, A and B, and if they're similar in ideology, but one is like, one has passed more policies and one is, well, more strategic in their approach to like governance as such, then strategic voting will help more because these people will go towards the party that has actually like significantly benefited communities.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. I know that it's going to be very difficult, but then do you think negative campaigns can have, like, assuming that negative campaigns have true value, like they're not going to say something which is wrong? Tell me why negative campaigns are good or why negative campaigns are bad.
Because if a politician says something wrong about you, you need to have a way like you can like cross them, like say something bad about them so it does not harm your own front. So yeah, we should have negative campaigns because it gives us a way to find other people's words that are like breaking down our front.
Okay. Anything else? Do you think it gives more information to people? Why do you think more information being given to people is essentially helpful in democracy?
Because like the politician is not going to go forward and like list his faults, so it is necessary to have a negative campaign so like the other like people get a view on like what the person has done wrong, like the political party has done wrong.
Okay. Anything else? Do you think there's something called as the more information that people have, the more informed choices people are supposed to make? So informed choices about who they want to vote for. Okay. Now, why negative campaigns should not exist?
They could exaggerate the harms of any flaw in another political party.
Yes. What is the binary of negative and negative campaigns? What exists if there is no negative campaigns?
Well, the good representatives that a political parties maintain, that will be maintained, and the people will choose on based on that, but not on the
Yeah.
true sense of the person.
So there's going to be positive campaigns, but you would not like think about, okay, if Arna and I are like running in an election, I'm going to be more focused on telling as to why you should vote for me and why I'm a better actor, as opposed to proving as to why Arna is a bad actor. So you're more likely to work policies. If you have to run a principle, what principle would you run to say that, oh, negative campaigns are bad? Is it a very difficult question? If not, let's just like move on. Because I think it's going to take a long time and I'll just like finish it off. So political campaigns, we're done with. People's choice is very important. So do you think that it's always the people's choice when it comes to democracy? Which is actually, I'm going to give you a very different opinion about how this works. And I think we've already discussed about strategic voting. Sometimes people vote for people. So in general, when you vote for a particular party, it's going to reflect your ideology of the like your ideology. So even if it is like, let's say, a particular political party which is being elected, it shows that that's what the majority of people have as an ideology, or is the most similar in terms of resemblance of what the opinion of people is. So people's opinion or people's will is reflected by the political parties. But votes are essentially something which is based on agency, the agency to be able to choose whether or not like you think a particular party is right or wrong, but also the agency to determine your own vote. Essentially, in India, you don't have a lot of people who are able to vote for what or who you want to vote for. Example, women in rural areas don't necessarily vote for who they actually want to, but then they have their choice being dominated by their husbands, who would tell them, okay, this is the party that you're supposed to vote for. But secondly, there are also corrupted votes, meaning political parties with high capital would use their influence and use them to, let's say, influence poor and vulnerable individuals. I think we already talked about distribution of some booths. This happened in Tamil Nadu election 2016. A lot of complaints came out, but also it's very evident that like alcohol and like liquor is being used to garner supports from poor people, because they say that, oh, like if somebody is able to give me immediate gratification, I'm still happy with it, as opposed to anything else. So people are likely to fall for these things, and therefore corrupt vote still exists. But thirdly, there's gerrymandering that happens, meaning it's a very common practice by Trump in USA, but in India it also happens. So gerrymandering is basically manipulation of boundaries of the constituency. So for example, when you like see the boundaries of different constituency in a state, you would just manipulate the boundaries in so far as it's going to help you with respect to garnering more support. So if you think that particular area has more support for your political party, you're going to use that into your advantage and use it to an extent that, okay, if I am going to make like the boundary in such a way, it's more likely that like this is going to help my political party win, because that's where I have the most amount of people voting for me. So it happens in West Bengal, Punjab, etc. There are many states in India who have gerrymandering, but let's not go there. There's also something called as electoral poll violence, which happens a lot in West Bengal. Goons at the polls would just be standing just to like make sure that we're voting for the party that they want to. It's very like sad, but it also like has created so many like violence and like human rights violations and stuff like that. There's also something called as EVM frauds. 11 political parties claimed that BJP, like it against BJP in 2022 August. EVM fraud is basically like you telling that, look, like there can be so many problems in the EVM, the machine by which you vote, and you can simply like just like manipulate it in a way that, okay, even if I'm going to vote for, let's say, BJP, is going to show that I have voted for Congress. So this is all something which happens. So this in general to tell you that like it's not always that votes are fair, and free and fair elections is the very big thing that has to be like made sure of. Yes, Anna, go on.
Is it possible for one, like a party has to influence one, like the most influential person in the city, and that single person will influence all the people?
I think yes, it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's based on the political ideology of people, but like I told you this example, right? A lot of like political parties just use, not a lot of, I think BJP uses I think these big figures in all district elections as well, and it impacts the way how they see. Yes, Arav?
Ma'am, so can we also give an example of like targeted advertisements or like personalized advertisements which were done in, again, the Trump elections, where like Cambridge Analytica was used, and like that agency sent out advertisements to everyone, like personalized advertisements, and that
Yeah.
influenced people to vote for Trump, and that's why they think it's like a
Exactly. This is a very good example too. Yes, you can use it. Okay, so call out and accountability. How can you make sure that the politician is being held accountable? There's something called as protest, online backlash, vote out of power. Obviously, voting out of power is the last resort. That okay, if like you want to hold the particular person accountable, you would not vote for them again. But this is the last resort. But there's several more things that you can do. If you think that a particular person is not acting against your will, just go on and protest, march, which shows the general common disagreement. For example, farmers protest and how like the laws were withdrawn. Also, filing case. I mean, a lot of like legislations are up there in the Supreme Court and High Court, just to like be declared as unconstitutional if you think they are going to like violate your acts, and if the government is essentially becoming more oppressive. Obviously, you can go on and criticize the policies on social media, because it makes it much more easier and accessible. You can go on and like call out your opposition leaders. Obviously, opposition leaders and opposition party like makes a lot of difference in with respect to democracy. So I think even if you're voting for a particular party and the particular party does not come into power, they can still be opposition. And if you have a good opposition, it's largely going to keep a check on the political party who is in power, which is essentially is very good. Then you have press conferences. We don't have a lot of press conferences with the prime minister, unfortunately. But then press conferences essentially make sure that you would have a large number of people like the news media channels are like sitting in front of you, and then you can directly have a conversation with them. Then you have independent media, meaning like you would want to have independent media, meaning news media channels like actively criticizing what the government is doing, but not necessarily the right wing like news media, or like let's say the media which is being bought by the government, because you essentially cannot show anything against them. Before I move on, there's like a small activity again. What do you think is like more important, like social media campaigns or in-person campaigns, and why so?
Social media campaigns are more important and more significant and rally more support since they have a wider reach, and it's much easier also to perform social media campaigns since the amount of investment is much lesser.
Also, a single person can be oppressed, like he can be like pressed to like take back the complaint or do something. But if the people are in more like quantity, like there's a lot of population, like popularity of that certain movement, it's hard to like make them go away. You have to hear what they're saying.
Okay. What else? What else is good about social media campaigns or bad about social media campaign? You can go on with either. Think what is bad about social media camp? Like just like not bad about social media campaign, you don't have to like just oppose it. But like tell me in general as to like why in-person like rallies are more important to have.
Also, social media, like people like in rural areas don't like have the facility to like go for social media, like so they have to go in person. They need support in person.
Very good. Anything else? Don't you think it has more impact? Because the fact that there are few people out there protesting in front of parliament has more impact as opposed to few people out there on the internet talking about a certain policy. So the impact on the people, yes or no?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, if they're going in person, like, it's a more chance of like getting better results. But like social media campus, can't they like go for higher reaches, like directly pin them?
Directly pinging them.
Yeah, like directly like I don't really know what social media, but like, they can really like pin like
I mean, like,
whatever they.
if you're going to go and like ping a legislator, I don't think they're going to like they're likely to A see it or B reply it or care about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Who do you think the actual news media is more likely to talk about? Social media campaigns or in-person rallies?
In person, but in person rallies also have the like the result of getting accidents. Like there was a farmer rally and the guy like crashed into them.
Yeah.
So they have like accidents.
Okay. Anything else? Or should we move on? Okay. Cool. Yes, so you have called out nationalism. I just wanted to just briefly tell you why nationalism is good or bad. So nationalism can be good or bad based on the idea that like nationalism is good because it gives you solidarity, gives you the idea that you have to have a unified front against social ills like casteism, terrorism, etc. But solidarity against external entities, I think a lot of people were able to go ahead and have decolonization because of it. We were able to do a lot of social reforms, sovereign reforms because of nationalism, because we understand it, like understood the idea that recognition of territory is important, but idea that like, look, self-reliance is also very important. We need to stop the idea that, you know, like a lot of imports are just coming from China. We're just using a lot of trade from China, and therefore we need to have self-reliance. We need to give importance to the local trade and stuff like that. But when you don't have nationalism, things like trade debt or things like dumping policies can exist, and therefore Bangladesh is dependent on China. Like a lot of things, a lot of international politics exist because of nationalism not being there. But also nationalism is not like the best thing to exist as well, because a lot of like wars were led because of nationalism, things like Napoleon and his French nationalist ideology, Nazi Germany, etc., Cold War existing, so on and so forth. But also led to supremism, which means that Western nations and European nations felt that, look, we should start colonizing like the East, and we should start colonizing the countries simply because it's going to make sure that our ideas, our ideologies, which are so supreme, so better than others, that we are going to be able to civilize the other nations as well. Also led to secession, meaning just like taking over the other nations and stuff like that. But then it also increased the idea of military tensions, because the reason why China essentially like escalates a lot with respect to India is because they have toxic nationalism and they think that they can do anything. But also things like Russia trying to get or rebuild USSR because of they think that it's a nationalistic move to do, and therefore the Ukraine war existing. But there are other things like international organization. So I'm not going to deal with like the why toxic nationalism is bad. I think I already told you, because it's just going to increase the discussion time. I'm just going to like quickly summarize to the entire idea of international organization. So why essentially international organizations are good or bad? So international organizations are more or less products of treaties. So it's just like the cooperation between sovereign nations and is based on alliance and mutual agreement more often than not. People start coming together like initially before the formation of UN. People realize that if we do not form a particular international organization, which is going to make sure that like wars do not exist, which is going to make sure that peace is existing, and that's like immediately after World War II. That's when they came up with the idea of UN, but also they realized that, you know, different countries can be dependent on each other without having a particular kind of exploitation. And therefore things like WTO, WHO, ILO also came into picture. So these international organizations can be twofold. One, the international organization, which is global, meaning UN, obviously, and can be regional, meaning African Union, Arabian Union, BRICS, SAARC, etc. And then you have power dynamics. So power dynamics is basically like we all know that US has so much like influence in the UN because of the fact that that particular nation is the most powerful and therefore most influence in that. But also power exists with respect to the veto power in the United Nations Security Council, meaning you can literally veto any policy, any resolution, and nothing is going to get passed. So China, United States, France, United Kingdom, all of these nations have the veto power. And then you have China. So even though we have international organizations into picture, there's so much like threat between China, or like the conflicts between China, like the disputes between China and USA, which can lead to things like fall of WTO, or like just lead like the US withdrawal in WHO. So the reason why all of it matters is because there are competing interests between China and USA, and therefore it has led to things like just the fact that you know, like US feels threatened, and therefore a lot of like other escalations happen because of that. But secondly, there's also things like ICC, International Criminal Courts, where you have like it being set for settling the disputes between two nations. For example, if China escalates against India and unlawfully kills civilians in India, we can go into the International Criminal Court so that we can sue China and like ask them for reparations. So therefore, but then the problem with that is that International Criminal Court is essentially seen as the court of Africa, meaning they just deal with like a lot of cases which are dealing with, let's say, Uganda and Rwanda and all of that, but not necessarily the actual states who are into like consideration and the people who actually fight. Then you have US has a hypocritical stance. Even if like international organization exists, they don't necessarily always support the nations who are vulnerable. They don't like, for example, what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Afghanistan. They never like sent aid, which they're doing right now. But then initially at the time where there was an urgency to send, they never did it. And then a lot of like problematic council members in UN. I mean, in even like UN says that, oh, we want to protect human rights. Sudan was essentially like elected as one of the council members, which is problematic because human rights violations happen a lot in the country of Sudan. But other than that, you have good things about like international organizations, like good help throughout, like centralized body to help you in times of aid. IMF can always help you and give you aid. But secondly, WHO did phenomenally in COVID and help like people to get vaccines, access to vaccines, and so on and so forth. It can help you like to like have better problem solving mechanisms, common ground to fight with, but also additional support in terms of finance, research, and implementation. You have a couple of reports being published every year, every like now and then with respect to WTO and WHO. You have collective actions against things like climate change and like human rights, which needs like collective actions on an international level as opposed to just like a particular country doing against it. But also the fact that a lot of like nations started having liberal ideas, Western liberal democracy, like the adaptation to the fact that, you know, right to privacy exists, right to bodily autonomy exists, feminism, and all of these like labor laws started having like consideration simply because you had like liberal democracy seeping into the different nations because they had to get it ratified through resolutions, right? So all of these things existed, and therefore we were able to do a lot of good stuff, and therefore international organizations have a lot of value. But apart from that, I just wanted to tell you that like politics in of itself is not bad, but power hunger is something which is bad and which leads to like of exploitation of vulnerable individuals. And that's the end of the entire session. I just like really wanted like to discuss more stuff, but we don't have time, and I think I'm already running like almost 25 minutes extra. So we're not going to be able to do that. But apart from that, if you have any questions, you can ask. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I had a question like about Germany. Like there was like Nazi war, like Hitler like turned all people around. Would that go in